I'm standing here on the rocky, barren slopes of Pikes Peak in the Colorado Rocky Mountains. Back in 1806, Zebulon Pike led an expedition that was unable to reach the summit of this 14,000-foot mountain that now bears his name. Now fast forward almost 100 years. In late August of 2014, three Girl Scouts, Rebecca, Tristan, and Jordan, set out to climb this very same mountain. With them, they carried backpacks that had the supplies they thought they might need, including sleeping bags, water, and fire building materials. The climb was tough, but eventually they successfully summited, which is a significant accomplishment. But the real challenge came when they headed back down. Not far from the summit, they came across two teenage boys who were in trouble on the exposed slopes. One was showing signs of altitude sickness. He was lightheaded and throwing up. The other was rapidly becoming hypothermic. His clothing had become soaked when his water bottle accidentally opened. The wind was blowing, it was cold, and he was shivering. They had no food, no water, no spare clothing, no shelter. They were inexperienced, and they were rapidly running out of options. But the story ends well. The Girl Scouts had come prepared. They built a shelter out of tarps and rope that they had along. They fed the boys food and water, and they warmed them up by building them a fire. I wasn't there to see what they did, but I'm guessing when they decided they needed to help, it didn't turn into a game of amoeba ball. Have you ever seen a game of soccer played by 5-year-olds? Everyone clusters around the ball and follows it wherever it goes, like a giant amoeba. Sometimes even the goalie is in the scrum. There's no strategy or organization, and if they actually make a goal, it's probably by accident as much as anything else. I'd like to think that the Girl Scouts turned their decision into a plan and were organized about it. One of their decisions was to build a fire. Now, have you ever seen amoeba ball applied to fire building? There's this decision to build a fire, then everybody clusters around the fire pit and tries to get a flame going. Even if one of them succeeds, there's not enough tinder or kindling for it to catch and grow into a fire because there's no plan, no teamwork, no organization. 72 matches later, you may or may not have an actual fire. How could all this be done differently? What they need to have is a plan to turn that decision into action. And that's step 4 of the problem-solving process, implementing the decision. For most jobs, a simple framework will help you get organized. I like to look at 6 T's: task, time, talent, team, treasure, and tiller. So let's say you're a group of 8 people and you want to get a cooking fire going within the next hour before the sun goes down. How do you come up with a plan that will keep you from starting another game of amoeba ball? Begin by thinking about what the key tasks are to have a healthy cooking fire safely roaring in camp. Well, of course, you're going to need to collect some fuel wood, and then there's the fire itself. That's got to get started. Plus, you'll need some of that really small fuel called tinder to help the flame take hold. But you can't go straight from tinder to fuel wood, so you'll need to gather up some of that medium-sized kindling to help the fire grow. And I'll bet at some point, someone will remember that for this to be a safe fire, you're going to have to build a fire ring and get a way to put the fire out. And then, of course, if we're cooking over the fire, then we'll have to come up with some way to hold the meat over the flame. After task comes time, and backwards planning is the method I like to use. You start by imagining what it should look like at the end, and then work your way backwards to the present. Before you start cooking, you're going to need those fuel logs burning for at least half an hour to build up some good coals. You'll also need something to hang your chicken on, so someone's going to have to put together a spit. Before those fuel logs can catch, you'll need some kindling to help get the flame big enough. And before that, you'll need to have a fire started in the first place. And don't forget the fire ring. That will have to come before everything else. By thinking of things this way, you can also see you don't need everything all at once. We'll need the fire ring, tinder, and kindling pretty much right away. But we have a little time before we'll need the fuel wood, and it's at least an hour before we'll need that spit. So once people are done with an early task, they can shift their focus to another one. Now it's easy to see how you can match teams of people to each of these lines of effort. After task and time comes talent, and the goal here is to match the skills of our people to the task to be accomplished. So let's take a look at who's on our team. You and your assistant leader are both pretty experienced with the outdoors, building fires and using an axe and knife. You have a couple of older guys. One is a bigger guy and very good with the axe, and the other is your best fire starter. Then you have a couple of others with some experience, and 2 new guys who are enthusiastic but unskilled. So now match the people with the skills to the task that needs to be done. If Jimmy is your best fire starter, maybe tag him for that task. Building fire rings and getting water might involve some heavy lifting, so put a stronger, knowledgeable person in charge of that, maybe your big veteran. Gathering kindling is light work, but requires someone who knows what to look for, especially in wet or snowy environment. So another experienced person should be in charge of this task. Once you have the talent in place, use the rest of your guys to form teams. Depending on what the task is, you might even want to give one team a little extra help. Also, try to ensure that nobody has to work alone. Now that you have teams for each task, the next thing to think about is treasure. This could mean money if the task calls for it, but it's other resources too. The fire starter team will need a way to produce a spark, whether it's a Bic lighter, flint and steel, or a box of matches. They'll probably also need a sharp knife or hatchet to produce the tinder. The fire ring guys will need a shovel, a container for water, and maybe some work gloves. And the fuel wood guys may also need to be able to cut some wood down to size, so axe and saw plus rope to mark off a safe shopping area would be important. With everything else in place, the last T is tiller. We all know the tiller is the handle that attaches to the rudder that steers the boat. As a leader, you're at the tiller, but where should you be and what should you do? You're good at starting fires, so maybe do that yourself, right? Actually, no. You need to lead the entire process. If your head is down in the smoke trying to bring the flame to life yourself, then you're not going to notice that no one else is getting the kindling wood, or that the guys are breaking all kinds of safety rules over in the axe yard. As the group leader, you should be where the most critical action is so you can stay aware of what's going on and make good decisions at the right time. For building a fire, it looks like it might mean deciding where the fire ring actually is going to go and seeing that the fire starter has all the help that he needs. So that's the place for you to start. And as long as you're there, you can lift some rocks yourself. Your second in command should be where the next most important thing is happening, and that's probably the fuel gathering process. So put him in overall charge of that. Now you're in the right position to make good decisions and make sure your teams move on to their next task when they're done with the first. So there you have it. You figured out the tasks that need to be accomplished. You managed your time through backwards planning. You matched your talent to the key tasks you have to accomplish. You built teams around those guys, and you provided them with the treasure they need to accomplish the mission. Meanwhile, you're at the tiller, leading the whole effort. If you're the next General MacArthur, maybe you can do all this in your head. But it's a good idea to run through these steps as a group if there's time to get their input. Your job as a leader is to make sure that the plan gets implemented, make corrections along the way if it gets off track, and very importantly, think ahead to what's coming next. After all, we've got a pretty good plan now to get the fire started. But who's preparing the chicken? Looks like there might be another plan in our future. And we don't want to start looking like another game of amoeba ball, especially if the Girl Scouts happen by. Thanks for watching.
这就看。